Step closer, friends. Imagine, just for a second, the flickering torchlight of an ancient, completely ruined kingdom. I want you to step into the shoes of a weary traveler, gathering around the fire to hear a dark, rhythmic fable of power, hypocrisy, and a deeply unsettling transformation. Welcome to the necropolis. In today's explainer, we're diving into the myth of the gilded satirist. It's this fascinating narrative tracing a cynical jester's Faustian evolution, starting out as just a mere court entertainer and transforming into a terrifying divine instrument. We're going to break down the exact architecture of this mythic descent and the ascent that follows. We'll look at the masks we wear, the truths we bury, and what exactly happens when the very foundation you stand on suddenly takes flight.
To really understand this world, we have to listen to the spirit siblings, our ancient narrators for this tale. One of them, the wit, tells us that the jester's arrival wasn't just for amusement. Quote, "Step closer, you weary souls of the gray stone. I unleashed a laughter that functioned as a jagged blade." Just chills, right? This laughter shattered a figure known as the Hollow Judge. This was a magistrate who hid behind a radiant violet mask of totally unearned authority, constantly judging others just to avoid facing the rot in his own heart. The jester doesn't fight him with a sword or a shield, no. He slices through the magistrate's massive ego with a jagged laugh until that mask literally shatters into dust, finally revealing the dead, starlight-reflecting eyes beneath it.
So what exactly was the jester destroying? Well, he was dismantling what's called the architecture of stasis. Before he showed up, the necropolis was trapped in this paralyzed frost-like illusion of control. The ruling lords actually believed that if they just built a rigid scaffolding of moral stone, and if they, quite literally, stacked the skulls of their ancestors in perfectly logical rows, they could freeze death itself. It's crazy. It was this crushing, solemn expectation of order. They were so utterly terrified of the chaos of their own desires that they built a world of permanent frost to hide in.
Now, to truly grasp the jester's role, we really need to look at him through the lens of Goethe's Faust. He is, essentially, the spirit that always denies. The jester is a total Mephistophelian figure. He's the ultimate truth-telling monster. You see, he doesn't attack the kingdom from the outside like a traditional enemy. He speaks from inside the wound. He is the necessary negation, the spirit that completely denies the hypocritical order of the necropolis. He deliberately dismantles their fake stasis by just mirroring their own buried sins back at them.
And this reveals the core tension of our protagonist. It's a brilliant contrast. On the surface, he's totally ridiculous, right? Shimmering red and blue motley, bells ringing, just a performing fool meant to soothe the Lord's daily anxieties. But underneath that colorful fabric lies an ancient, terrible truth. He's a dark stone gargoyle, an instrument of moral accounting. This liminality, existing right on the edge between the completely absurd and the divine, that is his superpower. Because he's dressed as a fool, he's the only person in the entire kingdom allowed to speak ancient truth to absolute power.
The unmaking of this decadent court unfolds in a tragic three-act descent. Act 1, the uncanny sits. Act 2, the scepter wakes. And culminating with Act 3, the angelic judgment.
Okay, so let's talk about his gear. Every jester of sufficient tenure absolutely requires a scepter to help share the heavy weight of the truth. And this is no mere stage prop. Crowned with a dark stone gargoyle, this thing actually absorbs the light of the room. As the jester sits there in the decadent court, the stone physically warms in his hand, silently digesting the deep corruption of the lords around him. It acts as our central narrative anchor, a silent witness to every single sin they honestly thought they had buried under all that luxury.
As that scepter wakes up, the jester begins his feast as the unbinding agent. Imagine him whispering to the lords in his cynical voice. Did you truly think you were safe? He touches the grim fortress walls. Look as your heavy stone floors soften into wet parchment beneath your feet. Watch your cold iron swords warp into delicate peacock feathers. The absolute certainty of their authority just shatters into a surreal playhouse of unpredictable whim. He isn't just changing their minds, he is unbinding the very physical weight of their reality.
But why? Why unbind their reality like that? We return to Faust for the answer here. I am part of that power which eternally wills evil and eternally works good. By destroying their safety, their precious precedent, and the cozy comfort of the court, the jester acts as a completely necessary evil. Think about it. The destruction of their gilded facade is literally the only way to clear the ground for actual living truth. The jester is the shadow they absolutely need to define their light. And this brings us to the climax of the descent, the angelic judgment. This angel isn't a person. It's a manifestation of pure, unadulterated truth. It's a light so honest it's practically blinding. The lords desperately try to hide behind their gold, but they're crushed under the immense weight of their own hypocrisy. And here is the brilliant twist. The terrible angel recognizes the jester as the only honest soul in the room. Not because the jester is pure or good. No, it's because he is the only one who openly admits to being part of the engine of evil.
Next up, we transition into the cathedral's bridging shadows and the ascent to the source. So at the hypocritical court now lying in absolute ruins, the pacing shifts. The jester begins an unstoppable, solemn, spiritual climb. First, he leaves the earthly cell of human wagers far behind. Then he passes through the great bridging shadows of the cathedral's dark interior, ascending ever upward toward an ancient source. At this point, he's no longer just a cynical court performer. He has evolved into a divine instrument compelled by a music much, much older than the kingdom itself.
And what exactly is he climbing toward? The Great Star. This is our ultimate destination. It's a nameless, completely impartial illuminator. We aren't talking about the sun, which is bound by human schedules and approved daylight hours. The Great Star belongs to the ancient night. It shines on the noble and the ignoble alike, with no agenda, and with terrifying impartiality. It represents a profound illumination that exists entirely outside the arbitrary rules and little arrangements of that fallen court. This upward climb marks a monumental shift for our jester, beautifully captured by Goethe's angels. Whoever strives with all their might, that one we can redeem. The contrast here is just striking. Earlier, remember, the jester was the spirit of negation, the cynical destroyer pulling everything apart. But now, driven by that older music, he is striving upwards with all his might. The spirit of negation has transformed into a spirit of striving, restlessly seeking redemption in the eternal light. And so, the necropolis undergoes its grand transformation. The static control of those gilded cages and absolute certainty has been totally dismantled. The messy, living ink of humanity merges with the architect's ultimate stain. And what remains? Amor fati, the love of one's fate. It's a beautifully ruined landscape where the foundation is always terrifyingly in flight. It looks like a collapse, sure, but it's actually a massive liberation. It's an invitation to join a celebratory dance. The ancient storytellers, our spirit siblings, leave the wandering survivors and us with one final provocative challenge. Will you speak a radical yay to the storm, or will you remain frozen in the gray stone of your own architecture? Are you going to hide behind absolute certainty, stacking the skulls of old ideas just to feel safe? Or will you embrace the beautiful ruin of your own complex truth? Because sometimes, your world needs to shatter before you can finally see the stars. Thanks for joining me on this descent and ascent. Keep striving, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.